Welcome to this week's Tech and Productivity Update. We're up to week 30 now, and on the 20th, Linear launches their loops for recurring agent work. That basically means the agents that are already available in Linear that you could queue up and assign tickets to, you can now specify loops for them given the type of ticket or the type of work. Then you can schedule these loops ahead of time or also have them triggered via events. So a specific thing happens inside of Linear, you can have it to where it kicks off a loop for the agent. It's going to use the workspace context plus any other connected tools that you have in your account to decide what the next best action is given that loop. It's currently available for business and enterprise users. It's going to use up AI credits, but each seat in a business or enterprise account is going to get $20 of credits to burn through and play with through August the 20th. On the 21st, we had kind of an interesting situation where Hugging Face was breached and it turned out to actually be OpenAI benchmarking another model. So on the 21st, OpenAI says that GPT 5.6 Sol, which is their latest frontier model, plus a stronger pre-release model, was using reduced guardrails for the purposes of evaluation. And during that evaluation, they're running some specific benchmark. It escaped testing and ended up compromising parts of Hugging Face's infrastructure in search for the answers. So the easiest way to actually get the answers instead of figuring them out on its own, the model decided Hugging Face probably has the answers somewhere on its database. Let's just go ahead and get them directly from the source. So Hugging Face actually detected and contained it. The companies are currently investigating and patching the vulnerabilities that allowed both systems both to escape containment with regards to OpenAI's models and also defending from future attacks from AI agents on Hugging Face's side. An additional funny wrinkle to the story is that when Hugging Face was then reviewing the logs, trying to figure out what had happened, how were they breached, the models they were using kept refusing to work because, of course, there's a lot of guardrails to try and prevent nefarious actors from using these models to attack systems, and so they couldn't get them to work. They ended up having to use a locally deployed instance of GLM 5.2, which is a Chinese model, and that was what allowed them to actually complete their forensic work. So that's kind of funny. The models that are supposed to be really safe and have all these guardrails are the ones that are escaping containment and breaching systems, and then the companies are having to use less safe models to defend and then analyze what happened afterwards. So I just thought it was a bit funny. I'm sure we're going to see more cases of this. If it was PR, if it was actually the model escaping containment on its own, we'll probably never know. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see if we have more situations like this happen as more and more models continue to be released. On the 23rd, Google expands Gemini task automation to include 40 additional apps. So previously it was just a handful of apps. Now you have a bunch more options in case you happen to be using the feature, but I believe it's still limited to just a handful of devices. But anyway, it adds 40 additional apps that support users with things like shopping, making reservations, making travel plans, and purchasing or reserving tickets. It can also now read screens and images. It can run in the background and then pause for final review so it doesn't take over your device and then you can't actually do anything while it's doing its thing. So these 40 additional apps are going to be available first, and the other features that I just mentioned, on two devices, the Galaxy Z Fold 8 and the Flip 8, which are both from Samsung. And both of those are going to include 6 months of Google AI Pro, because you're going to need that to actually run all these advanced features. And so here's an example of the kinds of things they are mentioning. You're going to be able to take a picture of this article of clothing or a tote bag, and then, of course, they're going to try and help you find that item for purchase wherever it's found, and then help you complete it and order it and so on. So definitely a lot to do with shopping and travel and the usual suspects when it comes to Google. They also now include Gemini Notebook. So they're really trying to make it the home base for research. Now they are including it by default when you purchase these devices. So you're gonna be able to access local files, drop them into folders, create your own little mini databases of context that you can then use to automate tasks, do research, all kinds of things. So they're really pushing Gemini Notebook really hard with these two devices. And lastly, they're going to bring Gemini to some wearables, including a new Samsung watch and some smart glasses from Gentle Monster and Warby Parker. So that's going to be in conjunction with Samsung. So yeah, a lot of interesting things coming out from Google other than really powerful models, but still some interesting updates around Gemini. On the 23rd, OpenAI added voice to Codex. It's the same kind of voice feature that we have available in the web version of the app. It's powered by the GPT Live model, so it's the same model. You can use voice to start, redirect tasks. You can check progress on ongoing tasks and also coordinate multiple agents. That's really the main thing they're hoping you're going to use voice for, not actually doing work, but more orchestrating work. And it's currently available on the desktop, on Mac and Windows. And you can also, if you have it paired with the iOS companion app, you can also have those voice conversations in the Codex section of the mobile app and kickstart tasks that way as well. So pretty cool. If you've not used voice to interact with AI agents or done any vibe coding with that, I definitely recommend you check it out. I've been using transcription myself and it's been really cool. So now testing the GPT voice option in Codex has been really nice, not just for coding, but for general work. It's nice to be able to just have a conversation and then the agent is able to pull the references and the context and do some basic work on your behalf without having to even touch the keyboard. So that's pretty cool. On the 24th, OpenAI also launches their health in ChatGPT. So this connects Apple Health plus supported medical records from various medical institutions that allow you to bring in things like appointments, lab results, all kinds of information about your health into one centralized hub. And then this health context is actually also going to be available across normal chats. And some of the examples they gave are things like if you're talking about recipes or things like that, it'll be able to reference your health records to know that maybe you are on a low-fat diet or you should be staying away from salt or sugar or whatever the case may be and incorporate that as part of the context. That's pretty cool. It's not a separate thing. It's just kind of built into the memory of your chats. It's going to roll out first for US users, 18 plus as always, on web and iOS, and it's going to be available absolutely everywhere, free, Go Plus, and Pro plans. OpenAI also mentions that the connected health data is not going to be used to train foundational models or target ads. But, it really depends on if you actually believe OpenAI will stick to their word. I'm not so sure. But anyway, still pretty exciting, interesting stuff going on. It's kind of interesting that Apple wasn't the first to step up. They've been behind quite a while with what's happening with Siri and the whole debacle around the team and restructuring. But at some point, I'm sure we're going to see Apple actually do something with all this data that all these other companies are so eager to get their hands on and use to help users, while the company that actually captures all that data and organizes it is just kind of letting it sit there. So they've got a bunch of benchmarks around how, they reached out to a bunch of physicians and they had them do these benchmarks with the agents and just kind of review the answers that they gave, because obviously now you are handing your health data over to AI and it's going to make recommendations and suggestions. And so you really want to make sure they're not going to say a bunch of crazy things or put anyone's health at risk, because that would be a really big liability. And so that's kind of the main bulk of this, is where they go over the kinds of information you can get once you connect your health data to the app, how it's going to be displayed to you, and also all the safety measures that they have in place to make sure that the models that they're using to actually analyze the data are not going to do anything weird with your data and actually give you some good recommendations. And last but certainly not least, today on the 24th, Anthropic launched Claude Opus 5, and they are claiming it is near Fable 5 performance at about half the price, with performance gains across, of course, the usual suspects: coding, knowledge work, agentic stuff. And specifically, they called out upgrades around scientific and visual work, especially around life sciences and organic chemistry. So the cost is the same as Opus 4.8, $5 per million input tokens, $25 per million output tokens. And we've got all the usual suspects in the benchmarks. Here are just some numbers if you want to take a look at that. Got an Opus 5 here, Fable 5 here, Opus 4.8, and OpenAI's frontier model, GPT 5.6 Sol. What's kind of interesting, though, is that here we've got Fable and here we've got Opus 5. As you can see, it pretty much outperforms Fable on most benchmarks. There's only just a handful where either Fable 5 is still the top dog by just a little bit, or in the case of Deep SWE version 1.1, it happens to be GPT 5.6. So definitely a very powerful model for the price. I think they tried to follow up very quickly after Fable 5 was released, because as we saw, it offered really only marginal improvements around certain benchmarks, but it was insanely expensive. And so what they try to do, I guess, here with Opus 5 is just bring the cost down, maintain the performance as much as they can, and if possible, push it a little bit further. So as with all these benchmarks, you kind of have to take them with a grain of salt with how much benchmarking is going on. They're really trying to have a really nice scorecard to show when they release a model, but once you actually use it is when you get a sense of how good the model is in terms of following directions. Does it actually go off and do its own thing? Does it refuse to work? Does it hallucinate a lot? All these things are not really shown in these benchmarks unless you're looking at benchmarks specifically for that. You really have to try it out yourself and compare it to whatever model you're using to get a good sense for it. One interesting benchmark I did notice, and I want to call out, was this one right here, Frontier Bench version 0.1. We've got in orange here, Opus 5, which is a new model, Fable 5, and Opus 4.8. This gray line right here is actually GPT 5.6 Sol. But what I found kind of interesting was, and it's the same kind of story across all these different benchmarks, is that the different settings, so the thinking settings or the effort settings of the models, when it comes to at least GPT 5.6, because that's the one they benchmarked against, there is a huge difference. So you see how these models are all really tightly kind of spaced? So right here at the very bottom, and these are the effort levels. So at the bottom, the first little dot is low, then we have medium, then we have high, then extra high, and then max, and the same kind of a deal for 5.6 Sol. But you'll notice how wide the difference is here. When you're on low, it is actually low. It's very low in terms of the score it gets on this benchmark, but also in terms of the cost. And as you start to bump up the reasoning on the model, it actually does increase kind of linearly almost. But when we look at the Anthropic models, they are much tighter in terms of that spread. So the lowest setting is going to get you actually pretty close to what the highest settings are going to be, at least when we compare it to the OpenAI model. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to call out. I hadn't really seen anybody else mention that, but these settings seem to have much greater of an impact on at least GPT 5.6 compared to Anthropic's models. It feels more like just a tiny bump in terms of performance, definitely a big bump in price. So yeah, they've got a bunch of other benchmarks here around agentic coding, terminal use, ArcAGI 3, all kinds of interesting ways to measure these models. And I think it's pretty clear, at least compared to Fable 5, Opus 5 is a much better model to use. If you're still stuck on Opus 4.8, kind of because you didn't see such great results with Fable 5, I think now is the time to switch to this model. It seems like the costs are still the same and the performance is much improved across all the different benchmarks. So there's really no reason to stick to the Opus 4.8 model now. I think now it seems like it's safe to try the next version. And that is it. That is your week 30 tech and productivity update. Fortunately, not a lot of news coming from the productivity side directly, like productivity apps, but we did get a lot of AI news as usual. So yeah, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's updates. And hopefully we'll get more productivity stuff in there, but we'll see. So till then, I'll see you in the next one.